Hello folks, Alex here. Welcome to my shop. Today I'm speaking to you from inside a chair frame. Well, not exactly, but a chair frame that has some interest. It's not a frame that I've made. This is a European frame in beechwood. A frame that's made with very sophisticated machinery. There's almost no handwork on this frame except some of the transitions around the carvings have been cleaned up a bit. Nonetheless, this is quite an interesting frame. It will make a lovely large armchair, something you can sit in and curl up with a grandchild to read them a bedtime story. It'll polish up nicely. It will look fine. But right at the moment, it's got a problem. It's not in a position where it can be polished and then upholstered. Here's the problem. Yeah, this chair had an accident. Somewhere in its travels, the back stand on this side lost its foot. It snapped right off along the grain. Now this back stand, of course, is one continuous piece of wood. Now the chair is in my shop, so I can repair it. And the repair is simple enough. Glue a piece of wood on, carve and mold the piece of wood to fit and blend in with what was once there. Then reinforce the foot so that it doesn't come off. So that's all fairly simple. And that's not actually why I invited you here today. Actually, I say it's simple repair. But there's one complication to it. The complication is that in order to have a good glue joint, we need flat mating surfaces. Perfectly fitted surfaces, properly glued, are immensely strong. But how are we going to get this little stub of wood properly planed? Beechwood, of course, is somewhat prone to splitting, but it does glue well. So we could just, maybe take our block plane and... No, that's not going to work. To do a proper job, we've got to secure this frame. Can't hold it in one hand and plane with the other. And then we've got to find a way to manipulate the tool to give a proper surface. Now, if we have a piece of wood 2 feet long, it's relatively straightforward to plane it flat and out of winding. The piece of wood is large enough so that the plane can register on it. But this is only a couple of inches long, and it's really hard to plane without rounding it over. It can be very frustrating, especially for a beginner. So I'm going to show you a technique to do this kind of thing, something you might find useful for other purposes. But first I've got to take this lovely frame and secure it to my workbench, and then we'll take a look at how to plane that surface and prepare it for a glue up. Anyway, once I figure out how to clamp the thing securely, we'll come back together and I'll show you how to plane that off. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Now I finally clamped up the chair frame onto my bench. Clamping up something like this can be quite an elaborate process, but here it was very simple, really. I simply turned the chair around, put the back of the chair flat on the workbench, clamped it in place. I blocked up the front of the frame. Now the chair frame is secure. We can work on this offending leg and smooth that up. We can do that safely and securely because we know the frame is not going to go anywhere. The only piece of advice I would have for anybody doing something like this is don't mess around forever. Unless you're doing a lot of them, it's not worth trying to devise elaborate clamping jigs and fixtures. Just do it as simply and as quickly as you can, because nobody's paying you to clamp a chair up onto your bench. They're paying you to fix the problem. So that's what you got to do. So right now we'll switch our views around here a little bit, and we'll look at how we actually deal with this broken leg. Now here's a look at what we have to do with this broken chair leg. This is the surface that has to be planed off in order to glue another piece on. One way to do it is simply take a plane like this little smoothing plane and start planing away. That will work, but it's risky. If you're very good with a hand plane, you can plane that little short surface flat and out of winding and then proceed with the repair. On the other hand, this is actually very tricky. People are very impressed when you plane a long edge of a board and get a nice curly shaving. But this kind of work is really the skilled work. Now, myself, I could go about it that way, but this is just risky. I want to show you a better way of doing this. Now, the problem of doing it freehand is that there will be a tendency to plane in a hump or to twist a little bit as the plane goes through. Either way, you don't get a good glue surface. So the trick is how to guide the plane without a whole lot of setup. Well, I'm going to show you a way of doing it that's really simple, really quick, and it does the job, so you can get on with your job. So anyway, we're going to take a different look at this. I'll show you how I'm going to set up, and then how to plane this little short surface to get the proper characteristics for a good glue up. Anyway, we'll check it out in just a moment. Now, in the past, I have mentioned that sometimes when you're dealing with curved pieces of wood, chair parts or whatever, that in order to get proper measurements and mark off angles and that sort of thing, it's necessary to introduce some kind of a reference point that's basically not part of the frame itself, not part of the piece of wood. We're going to use the same principle here to plane off this little surface. And we want to do it quickly and inexpensively, and we don't want to waste a lot of time about it. So we're going to introduce a reference point that will guide the plane. So all I'm going to do is clamp a piece of wood. Just a strip of wood. I've kind of measured, find one that works. And I'll show you how it works. And I'm going to clamp it here. And this reference point, this reference board, is going to guide the plane to give me perfect planing on that little surface. So all I need to do is basically clamp up my batten. It doesn't have to be very fancy. I'll clamp one on the other side just to hold it in place. This piece of wood is now going to guide my plane. Of course, it means I can't use this little smoothing plane. It's not long enough to register. So here's where a long plane comes into play. Stanley number 7, 22 inches long. Not the biggest plane that Stanley made, but next to the biggest. They made a number 8 as well, this number 7. And now you can understand how this works. By keeping the heel of the plane on this piece of wood, the toe of the plane cuts here, toe of the plane, the cutter, we can keep planing and it will cut until we get down where we want. Just when we get to the edge, to the lowest point, we plane and then we stop. Because one thing about having a single reference point is that as we plane, the plane will tip a little bit with each pass. So if we don't stop, could wind up planing off most of that leg. We don't want to do that. But here's how it works. Put the toe of the plane on the piece of wood that we're planing. Keep the sole on the batten. Yeah, it's going to work just fine. I've got to take it down a bit more because we have a low point right here where it broke off. But that's going to be just perfect. So, oh. There you go, my friends. Planing done. Whole procedure so much faster to do than it is to explain. But now I have a flat surface. I can glue on the additional piece and finish the repair job. So, that's enough of this. I've got to go cook up some glue. We'll see you again. You take care. Use your head. It's woodworking, but it's puzzle solving too. So take care, and we'll see you next time.